Certain Hollywood narratives diminish with passing years, while others resurface later, more profound, more troubling, and utterly unavoidable. At 62, Demi Moore is finally articulating truths with a precision absent in her 20s, 30s, or even 40s. For the first time, she's disclosing what genuinely transpired within the private confines of her union with Ashton Kutcher. The mysteries she harbored, the anguish she concealed, and the reality she attempted to shield for an excessive duration. What remained unspoken for nearly 20 years has now transformed into the revelation that's reconstructing everything we believed we understood about their romantic narrative. The genesis of what appeared like a fairy tale. When Demi Moore encountered Ashton Kutcher in May 2003, she was 40 years old and still assembling the fragmented pieces of her separation from Bruce Willis. Ashton, merely 25 at that moment, arrived in her existence with a manner of tenderness and appeal she hadn't experienced in years. He paid attention, he respected, he cherished, or so it appeared. Their initial extended dialogue spanned 8 hours, an immediate emotional connection that convinced Demi she'd discovered someone who embraced not simply her celebrity status, but her wounded aspects as well. Within mere weeks, Ashton became acquainted with her daughters and even Bruce Willis, something practically unprecedented in Hollywood ex-partner relationships. By the time they wed on September 24, 2005, society had already designated them the quintessential illustration of a contemporary fairy tale. They merged households, established a production enterprise jointly, and openly lauded one another as though their bond had rewritten romance's regulations. Beneath that facade, a hidden catastrophe had already commenced, just 2 years preceding their nuptials. Demi had endured a heartbreaking miscarriage at 6 months gestation. They had already selected a name, Chaplain Ray. The tragedy devastated them profoundly. Demi held herself accountable. She had maintained sobriety for nearly 2 decades, yet she confessed in subsequent conversations that she had periodically smoked and consumed alcohol early in the pregnancy. She never ceased questioning whether she triggered her own child's demise. That remorse became an unseen barrier between them, even as they pursued IVF fertility procedures and adoption possibilities. Ashton expressed that the tragedy helped him recognize his readiness for parenthood, but Demi felt it propelled her into emotional despair she had never previously encountered. This catastrophe marked the initial fracture in their union, a trauma neither understood how to mend. As circumstances would demonstrate, the heartache wasn't the most troubling secret she would ultimately bear for him. The cost she bore to preserve their union. The miscarriage left Demi Moore in a delicate, susceptible state, and rather than recuperating, she began reverting to former behaviors she had struggled so intensely to abandon. After nearly 20 years of abstinence, she relapsed. What commenced as drinking during grief-stricken moments evolved into a gradual deterioration. Alcohol, prescription medications, and self-condemnation that hollowed her internally. Ashton attempted to console her initially, but gradually he became remote in manners he didn't entirely understand. The youngster man who once seemed like her rescuer now felt inaccessible. Frantic to preserve their marriage, Demi began doing whatever she imagined would make him remain. In her 2019 autobiography, Inside Out, she disclosed one of the most profound wounds she had carried for years. Ashton had requested threesomes, and she consented, believing that accommodating his desires would repair the separation between them. Instead, every concession left her feeling diminished, more hollow, and increasingly detached from herself. She subsequently acknowledged that these choices left her ashamed, bewildered, and doubting her personal value. The strain between them intensified as Ashton leaned more substantially into the notion that their marriage should embrace open-mindedness and modernity, while Demi felt she was surrendering her identity. Her efforts to become everything he desired gradually obliterated the woman she formerly was. And as she began descending into dependency, Ashton withdrew further, a pattern that only amplified her terror that she was no longer sufficient. Behind private walls, the emotional remoteness began resembling a soundless tempest. Ashton journeyed more extensively, remained absent longer, and began living like someone who no longer felt constrained by his commitments. She perceived it: the midnight absences, the justifications, the increasing frigidity in his tone. Everything suggested a reality she wasn't prepared to confront. Her daughters grew concerned, observing their mother diminish beneath the pressure of fear, guilt, and emotional desertion. What had previously been a residence filled with blended family joy gradually transformed into an environment of tension and unexpressed suffering. But the most devastating revelation still awaited her, and when it materialized, it demolished what minimal strength remained. The infidelity that destroyed everything. By 2011, 6 years into their marriage, Demi Moore was clinging desperately. She continued attempting to project a unified appearance for public consumption, still pretending that the household behind the grins was stable, affectionate, and intact. But her universe crumbled on September 24, 2011, the date that should have celebrated their 6th anniversary. Rather than commemorating their shared existence, Demi awoken to a nightmare she never anticipated. A Google notification on her device disclosed that Ashton Kutcher had spent the night with a 22-year-old named Sarah Leal. The revelation struck her like a tangible assault. What intensified the situation was that Demi had encountered the young woman previously, audacious enough to pass Ashton her contact information at a bowling venue directly before Demi and her daughter. It wasn't merely betrayal, it was degradation. And Ashton's admission made it irrefutable. He had strayed, but the most disturbing aspect of this incident wasn't the affair itself. It was the rationale Ashton provided afterward. He informed her that the threesomes she had accepted earlier in their marriage had obscured boundaries, as though her attempt to satisfy him, to retain him, to contort herself into whatever configuration he required, had somehow warranted the betrayal. For Demi, those statements penetrated deeper than the infidelity itself. They converted her sacrifices into culpability. And this wasn't the sole affair. She later discovered another woman, 21-year-old Brittany Jones, an earlier transgression she hadn't completely grasped at the time. Ashton had been drifting away long before she recognized the distance was irreversible. Mere days following the scandal's emergence, Demi was compelled to stand alongside Ashton at an anti-trafficking charitable function, feigning normalcy. Internally, she was fragmenting. The public didn't witness the trembling hands backstage, the panic she attempted to mask, or the manner she struggled to breathe beneath the pressure of sustaining a falsehood she could no longer endure. On November 17, 2011, she finally declared their separation. She stated she needed to remain faithful to her principles, words that were straightforward superficially, but underneath conveyed the gravity of a woman who had been pushed beyond her tolerance. What ensued next wasn't healing. It was the most profound descent of her existence, one that nearly terminated everything. The breakdown and the years she vanished. The conclusion of her marriage didn't deliver Demi relief. It delivered devastation. Following nearly 2 decades of sobriety, she had already begun faltering during the marriage, but the betrayal and public humiliation thrust her into complete collapse. On January 23, 2012, that collapse became impossible to conceal. Demi experienced a seizure during a gathering at her Benedict Canyon residence, caused by a hazardous combination of synthetic cannabis, nitrous oxide, and weeks of starvation-level dieting. Attendees observed in horror as she convulsed on the floor, and the 911 call that followed signaled the commencement of the darkest period of her existence. In subsequent months, Demi's addiction intensified. She consumed up to a dozen Vicodin tablets daily, accompanied by vodka and energy beverages. She became fixated on weight loss, gazing at herself in mirrors for hours, convinced she needed to be thinner, smaller, invisible. Her weight plummeted to approximately 102 pounds. The combination of exhaustion, malnourishment, and substances triggered additional seizures and alarming health crises. She retreated from public existence entirely, vanishing from functions, bypassing press engagements, and avoiding everyone she cherished. The breakdown didn't solely affect her. It demolished her connection with her daughters. Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah characterized those years as horrifying. They didn't recognize the woman Demi had become. She conversed differently, moved differently, and behaved like someone not fully present. Tallulah later expressed her mother seemed like a monster, not from cruelty, but from how drastically addiction had transformed her. The suffering became so overpowering that the daughters distanced themselves for their personal protection. In 2012, they severed contact. None attended Demi's 50th birthday celebration. She missed Rumor's landmarks, Scout's accomplishments, and the everyday instances that once united them. The silence between them extended for nearly 3 years. Finally, in September 2012, Demi entered Cirque Lodge in Utah, a luxury rehabilitation facility costing $150,000 a month. But even that didn't restore the relationships. Healing wouldn't commence until 2015, when Tallulah, freshly emerged from rehab herself, contacted her mother for the first time in years. But even as Demi fought her path back to existence, another truth about Ashton, a truth she had protected for years, would resurface and reshape everything we believed we understood about their marriage. The truth she never desired to articulate. As Demi gradually reconstructed her existence after 2015, she accomplished something she hadn't done in years. She began speaking truthfully. Therapy, rehabilitation, and the long, painful process of reconnecting with her daughters compelled her to confront memories she had buried beneath addiction, grief, and fear. And as she opened up in family counseling, then in conversations, and ultimately in her 2019 memoir, Inside Out, one truth kept resurfacing. The truth she had spent more than a decade protecting. It wasn't simply that Ashton had been unfaithful. It wasn't simply the threesomes, the rationalizations, or the emotional distance. It was something more profound. Something that influenced every decision she executed during those years. Demi felt that Ashton had been psychologically manipulated into believing she was inadequate, not youthful enough, not adventurous enough, not progressive enough to retain the man she loved. In her memoir, she disclosed that Ashton frequently made remarks about their age disparity, joking in manners that didn't feel like humor. He told her that monogamy wasn't realistic, subtly encouraging her to diminish her boundaries. Demi acknowledged she accepted circumstances she never would have accepted earlier in her existence, not because she wanted them, but because she feared losing him. This emotional erosion became the most troubling secret of their marriage. Demi hid how profoundly she was compromising herself, piece by piece, until she barely recognized the woman she had become. The miscarriage haunted her for years. She revealed that Ashton didn't fully comprehend her grief, a distance that made her blame herself even more intensely. She confessed that she believed their lost child was her failure, a burden she carried silently while Ashton proceeded forward, traveling, working, existing freely. Even following the separation, Demi remained silent about his conduct. She didn't discuss the cheating. She didn't discuss the threesomes. She didn't discuss the emotional manipulation. She attempted to protect him, protect his reputation, protect the years they shared. It wasn't until she turned 56 and later at 62 that she finally permitted herself to express the things she had kept buried, not to destroy him, not to expose him, but to reclaim the aspects of herself she had lost. Her confession wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth and healing following years of silence. Peace, forgiveness, and the final disclosure at 62. By the time Demi Moore reached her early 60s, everything about her existence had transformed. Not simply her profession or her relationships, but the manner she understood herself. Following years of silence, she recognized that telling the truth wasn't about exposing Ashton Kutcher. It was about liberating the version of herself she had abandoned along the path. As surprising as it appeared, healing didn't originate from anger. It came from clarity. In 2020, Ashton publicly stated there was no animosity between them and that he loved and respected Demi's daughters. He acknowledged that divorce made him feel like a failure, particularly following the miscarriage they had endured together. His words didn't erase history, but they revealed something significant. Neither of them had departed from the marriage without scars. The aftermath had shaped them both. In 2022, Demi took another unexpected step toward healing when she appeared alongside Mila Kunis, Ashton's wife, in a Super Bowl advertisement. Rather than resentment, the moment was characterized by humor and maturity. The two women joked about their shared history, demonstrating to the world that progressing forward was possible without bitterness. Behind the scenes, Demi and Mila constructed an unlikely friendship, even initiating a book club together. Then arrived 2025, the year Demi finally spoke openly about the darkest aspects of her relationship with Ashton. Not simply the cheating or the threesomes, but the emotional self-erasure she had experienced. She characterized how she had gradually surrendered her boundaries, her self-worth, and even her voice, all in an attempt to retain a man who was never meant to complete her. This, she revealed, was the genuine secret she had carried. She had lost herself long before she lost her marriage. But this time she shared the truth from a position of strength, not sorrow. She had reconstructed her bond with her daughters, she had healed former wounds, she had learned to love herself again, embracing what she called solo partnering, a commitment to being whole without depending on another person to fill the emptiness. At 62, Demi Moore didn't simply reveal Ashton Kutcher's darkest secret. She revealed her own. That silence had cost her more than heartbreak, and speaking out was the final step toward reclaiming her life. Demi Moore's journey reminds us that even the strongest individuals can lose themselves in love, yet still discover the courage to rise again. What moment in her story affected you most deeply? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more compelling Hollywood narratives, and share this with anyone who might find inspiration in Demi's resilience. Your support means everything to us. We'll see you in the next video.